Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Friday the 10th of June. I'm Andrew Wilson and this is Scotland at 7. I know that you may be disappointed because last night I said it would be Hugh here tonight, but dinna fash, Hugh will be here on Sunday. This evening I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 107 of the illegal Russian war of aggression, and then I'll take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Ukrainian troops claim they have advanced in fierce street fighting in Severodonetsk, but they say their only hope of turning the tide is with more artillery to offset Russia's massive firepower. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said the country was holding on to key frontline cities in Donbass. Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and other cities in Donbass, which the occupiers now consider key targets, are holding on, he said, adding that Ukraine had had some success in Zaporizhia. Sergei Haidai, the Ukrainian governor of Luhansk, has said the whole Free Luhansk region came under heavy shelling. Fierce street fighting continues in Severodonetsk. We are exhausting the enemy. Russia is once more looking for weak points in Ukrainian defences near the Seversky Donets River in eastern Ukraine, the Ukrainian Defence Ministry spokesperson Alexander Motuzanzik has said. He's told national television that Russian forces had not abandoned attempts to launch storming operations in the area. Ole Syniehubov, the governor of Kharkiv, has said that Russia has not been able to advance in his region despite extensive shelling. Russia is struggling to provide basic public services to the population in Russian-occupied territories, and Mariupol is at risk of a major cholera outbreak, the UK Ministry of Defence has said. The number of Russian soldiers killed since Putin ordered his troops into Ukraine could now be as high as 20,000, according to the latest assessments by Western officials. Putin has paid tribute to Tsar Peter the Great, drawing a parallel between what he portrayed as their twin historic quests to win back Russian lands. Ukrainian military casualties are between 100 and 200 a day, according to Mikhailo Podolyak, a senior advisor to President Zelensky. Finland's government is planning to amend border legislation to allow the building of barriers on its eastern frontier with Russia ahead of a decision on joining NATO. The Swedish Foreign Minister, Anna Linde, has said in Parliament that Sweden aims to make constructive progress in talks with Turkey over the Nordic country's application to join NATO. Russia may be getting more revenue from its fossil fuel sales now than before its invasion of Ukraine, according to US officials, as increases in global oil prices have offset the impact of import bans. And President Zelensky said he had a phone conversation with the French President Emmanuel Macron, in which special attention was paid to Ukraine's path to the EU. We are coordinating steps, he said. A High Court judge has ruled that a controversial deportation flight to Rwanda that was due to take off early next week can go ahead. Mr. Justice Swift refused to grant interim relief, urgent action in response to an injunction application made by 4 asylum seekers who are facing offshoring to Rwanda, along with the charities Care for Cali and Detention Action, and the Civil Servants Union PCS, which represents many Home Office workers, including more than 80% of Border Force staff. Lawyers acting for the asylum seekers and the groups had argued the policy was unlawful and sought the urgent injunction to stop next week's planned flight and any other such flights ahead of a full hearing of the case later in the year. Mr. Justice Swift supported submissions made by the Secretary of State and rejected the application to halt the Rwanda flight next Tuesday, but he did grant permission to the claimants to appeal. He said there was a material public interest in allowing the Secretary of State to be able to implement immigration control decisions. He also said that some of the risks of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda outlined by the claimants were very small and in the realms of speculation. The plan to offshore asylum seekers and outsource the refugee obligations of the UK, one of the richest countries in the world, to Rwanda, amongst the poorest, has been controversial since it was announced by the government on the 14th of April. About 30 asylum seekers, currently being held in immigration detention centres, are due to be flown there from a secret location in the UK by an undisclosed airline on Tuesday. It is the first of multiple legal challenges to the policy to have a live High Court hearing. The specific aspects of the policy under challenge in court were the right of the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, to carry out such removals, the rationality of her claim that Rwanda is generally a safe third country, the adequacy of provision for malaria prevention in Rwanda, and whether it complies with the Human Rights Act. And in the same hearing in the High Court in London today, the United Nations Refugee Agency made a dramatic intervention in their attempt to halt Priti Patel's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. In a late submission, the UNHCR claimed the Home Secretary misled, misled refugees over the organisation's support for the plan. The agency has also said the scheme failed to meet the required standards of legality and appropriateness for transferring asylum seekers from one country to another. It emerged on Friday that the government has cancelled the removal directions for 3 people who had asked the High Court to prevent their deportation. During the hearing, it emerged 2 more people will also have them cancelled. Letters sent by the Home Office to those seeking asylum assured them that the UNHCR was closely involved in the scheme to send people to the East African country, the High Court was told. But a letter from the UNHCR to the Home Office Minister Tom Pursglove contradicted this claim. We are also concerned by statements made in letters indicating that UNHCR has not expressed substantial concerns with regard to the shortcomings in the capacity of the Rwandan asylum system, the agency wrote. The High Court was told the UNHCR had a number of concerns about the asylum process in Rwanda, including discriminatory access to asylum, including for LGBT people, a lack of legal representation and interpreters, and difficulties in launching legal appeals. Laura Dubinsky QC, the barrister representing the UNHCR, said the refugee agency was concerned about inaccuracies in Home Office claims about its involvement in the scheme, saying the agency in no way endorses it and had told the government it believed it to be unlawful. The High Court is due to hear a further challenge to the policy on Monday, brought by the refugee charity Asylum Aid and supported by the campaign group Freedom from Torture. As I mentioned earlier, Vladimir Putin has compared himself to the 18th century Russian Tsar Peter the Great, drawing a parallel between what he portrayed as their twin historic quests to win back Russian lands. Peter the Great waged the Great Northern War for 21 years. It would seem that he was at war with Sweden. He took something from them. He did not take anything from them. He returned what was Russia's, the Russian president said on Thursday after visiting an exhibition dedicated to the Tsar. After months of denials that Russia is driven by imperial ambitions in Ukraine, Putin appeared to embrace that mission, comparing Peter's campaign with Russia's current military actions. Apparently, it is also our lot to return what is Russia's and strengthen the country. And if we proceed from the fact that these basic values form the basis of our existence, we will certainly succeed in solving the tasks that we face, he said. Putin, now in his 23rd year in power, has repeatedly sought to justify Russia's actions in Ukraine, where his forces have devastated cities, killed thousands and forced millions of people to flee, by propounding his view of history that asserts Ukraine has no real national identity or tradition of statehood. Critics said Putin's remarks proved that his complaints about historical injustice, eastward NATO expansion, and other grievances with the West were all a facade for a traditional aggressive war of conquest. An advisor to the Ukrainian government said the comments showed that attempts to negotiate with Putin or find an off-ramp from the conflict as the French President Emmanuel Macron has sought to do, were misguided. Carl Bildt, a former Prime Minister of Sweden, called Putin's desire to take back lands claimed by Russia a recipe for years of war. Peter the Great, an autocratic modernizer admired by liberal and conservative Russians alike, ruled for 43 years and gave his name to a new capital, St. Petersburg, Putin's hometown, that the Tsar had ordered built on land he conquered from Sweden. It was a project that cost the lives of tens of thousands of serfs, conscripted as forced labourers, to build Peter's window to Europe in the swamps of the Baltic Sea coast. In Washington, the House Select Committee investigating the deadly January 6 assault on the US Capitol in 2021 said that Donald Trump was at the center of a sprawling conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election that culminated in an attempted coup. With a shocking new account of the worst attacks on the halls of Congress in more than 2 centuries, the committee outlined in gripping detail over the course of 2 hours on Thursday night the grave threat posed to the American democracy then and now by the former president's actions. The American people deserve answers, said Congressman Benny Thompson, a Mississippi Democrat and chair of the committee. In evidence, Congresswoman Liz Cheney, a Republican of Wyoming and the committee's vice chair, said of Trump, aware of the rioters' chants to hang Mike Pence, the president responded with this sentiment. Maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence deserves it. Thompson and Cheney laid out what they describe as the unconstitutional misconduct of a former president who continues to peddle the lie that the elections he lost to the Democrats' Joe Biden was stolen from him, a lie they argue that he knows to be false. All Americans should keep in mind this fact, Cheney said during the primetime proceedings. On the morning of January 6, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain President of the United States despite the lawful outcome of the 2020 election and in violation of his constitutional obligation to relinquish power. Their presentation featured the never-before-seen video from the attack by extremist supporters of Trump who stormed the US Capitol to try to stop Congress from certifying Biden's win. In a cinematic display meant to grip a weary public, the panel weaved footage of the violence together with live testimony and videotaped depositions from some of Trump's closest allies and family members. These included the former Attorney General William Barr, Donald Trump's daughter and White House advisor Ivanka Trump, his son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner, and a long-time aide and spokesperson, Jason Miller. The first of 6 public hearings offered revelations on what Thompson described as a sprawling, multi-step conspiracy aimed at overturning the presidential election. Members of the audience gasped when Cheney said Trump, after being informed that the mob was calling for Pence to be hanged, told aides that perhaps his vice president deserved it. The committee showed a clip of Barr saying he repeatedly told Trump in no uncertain terms that he had lost the election and the claims of it being stolen because of widespread voting fraud were bullshit. In another interview, Ivanka Trump said she accepted Barr's determination that the presidential election had been fair. Drawing on the findings of their nearly year-long investigation, which includes more than 100 subpoenas, 1,000 interviews, and 100,000 documents, the Select Committee will attempt to establish a comprehensive sequence of events that built to the cold January day when Trump had encouraged his supporters to fight like hell. The attack, which played out in real time on national television, left more than 100 police officers injured as they clashed with a pro-Trump mob. 9 people lost their lives in connection with the riot, including a woman who was fatally shot by a Capitol police officer as she attempted to breach the House chamber. New figures from the Office for National Statistics show that almost 80% of adults are worried about the rising cost of living. The SNP has said that while concerns continue to grow, Westminster continues to let people down by failing to take meaningful action to put much needed cash in people's pockets. The new data reveals that almost 50% of adults surveyed were buying less food when shopping in the last 2 weeks, and that those on the lowest incomes, less than £10,000, had the highest percentage of feeling worried. Over half were reported to be using less fuel, such as gas and electricity, and 41% were spending less on shopping and essentials. Those most likely to report feeling worried about the rising cost of living included women, 81% compared with 73% of men, and disabled people, 82% compared with 75% of non-disabled people. The SNP has repeatedly called on the UK government to reinstate the £20 uplift to universal credit and to extend it to those on legacy benefits to financially support disabled people and those on the lowest incomes. Commenting, the SNP's Work and Pension spokesperson, Kirsty Blackman MP, said, "The Tory Westminster government is failing people in Scotland and across the UK by refusing to bring in the right support to put cash in people's pockets. Whilst the Scottish Government is doing what it can to financially support households across Scotland, including bringing in and doubling the unique Scottish Child Payment, uprating benefits and bringing in new ones, the UK Government cut universal credit by £1,040 and presided over a decade of austerity. And despite cutting Scotland's budget, 90% of the revenue for the Chancellor's windfall tax will come from profits made in Scotland. That means, not for the first time, Scotland's resources are bankrolling the rest of the UK and demonstrating how much stronger a position we would be in as an independent country. New figures from the Centre for Economic Reform, from the Centre for European Reform, have concluded that by the end of 2021, the UK's economy was 5%, or £31 billion, smaller than if we had remained part of the European Union. This comes as gas, food and electricity prices continue to soar, with UK inflation rates reaching a 40-year high as the UK's cost of living crisis continues to spiral out of control. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster Deputy Leader, Kirsten Oswald MP, said, "There can be no doubt that the only way to protect Scotland from Westminster's Brexit obsession is with independence. As the cost of living crisis continues to hammer households across all four nations, it has brought into sharp focus how Scotland also has a cost of living with Westminster crisis." The people of Scotland voted overwhelmingly in favour of remaining within the European Union because they knew this outcome would follow, and yet we still have to suffer its fate. This is wrong and democratically unjustified, she said. That is why independence is the only realistic route for Scotland to regain its EU membership and to escape this toxic Westminster system for good. The Council of Europe has rebuked the UK over a plan to grant conditional immunity to people accused of murder and other offences during the civil war in Northern Ireland. The body, which oversees the European Court of Human Rights, on Friday accused the government of not consulting stakeholders and expressed concern over the stated intention to pull the plug on inquests. It said it would make the formal request to the UK for further information about the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Bill, controversial legislation that was included in last month's Queen's speech, and would require an answer by the 1st of August. The legislation faced another setback when Keir Starmer confirmed Labour would oppose it. "We will vote against that legislation because it doesn't have the support of any of the political parties here in Northern Ireland," the Labour leader said during a visit to Belfast. The intervention casts doubt over the fate of the legislation, which may also be opposed by rebel Conservative MPs. Most of the 3,500 killings during the Civil War are unsolved, leaving a backlog of legacy cases that have bedevilled politics and policing in Northern Ireland. Downing Street initially planned to introduce a blanket amnesty that was widely viewed as an attempt to shield security force veterans from prosecution, leaving victims' families without any hope of truth or justice. After an outcry, the government tweaked the legislation to make immunity conditional on cooperation with a new independent commission for reconciliation and information recovery, calling it the best route to give victims and their families answers while giving security force veterans certainty. Under the plan, existing inquests and civil rights cases can proceed as normal if they have had substantive hearings, while less advanced and future troubles-related cases would be folded into the reconciliation and information recovery process. In the note published today, the Council of Europe said any legislation must comply with the European Convention on Human Rights and permit effective investigations into all outstanding cases. It noted with regret the lack of formal public consultation on the draft legislation and expressed concern over the plan to terminate some pending inquests. It requested further information to determine if the legislation would be compatible with the UK's obligations under the European Convention. The Council of Europe reiterated concern over shortcomings in UK investigations into killings by security forces in Northern Ireland in the 1980s and 1990s. It has become increasingly concerned over what it sees as the UK's failure to enforce European Court of Human Rights rulings requiring effective investigations into killings during the Troubles. A government minister, MPs, and several aristocratic landowners have received thousands in public funds from a government subsidy that was intended to stimulate the green transition. The renewable heating incentive was set up in 2014 to help businesses, public sector, and non-profit organisations meet the cost of installing renewable heat systems by paying them a tariff for each unit of heat produced from renewable sources. A parallel system was set up for homes. But concerns have been raised by the National Audit Office, which concluded that although the schemes had good potential to reduce the UK's carbon footprint, the department has not achieved value for money. The NAO also raised concerns about the policing of the system and the risk that it might be gamed. Currently, 22,000 businesses have signed up to the RHI, which is forecast to cost £23 billion by 2042. An investigation by Open Democracy has now found that a number of wealthy landowners and MPs are among the beneficiaries of the subsidy. These include the International Trade Minister Anne-Marie Trevelyan, Philip Dunn MP, who chairs the Environment Audit Committee, and Geoffrey Clifton Brown MP, who chaired the Select Committee hearing on the British RHI scheme. They also include the Duke of Devonshire, Peregrine Cavendish, and Thomas Coke, the Earl of Leicester. Peter Gaughan, Editor-in-Chief of Open Democracy, said, "At a time when energy prices are skyrocketing and millions are struggling with the cost of living crisis, we have found that an obscure heating scheme of dubious quality is costing billions, and that Conservative MPs and even a government minister have been benefiting." In 2015, Trevelyan and her husband installed 2 biomass boilers totaling 198 kilowatt capacity on the family estate, Netherwhitton Hall. Open Democracy have worked out, using numbers from Ofgem based on how many boilers and the size of property, that under the scheme they would probably have received just under £20,000 a year. Their boiler is powered by wood from the estate. It is estimated the estate will receive a total of £400,000 at 2015 prices by 2035. Trevelyan split with her husband in 2019 and no longer lives in that family home. Large landowners have received substantial income as a result of the grant. Chatsworth, the home of the Duke of Devonshire, installed 2 boilers to heat its 300 rooms, as well as its garden, stables, shops and restaurants in 2013. Figures provided by their installers state that they generate income of £69,758 a year through the RHI. That's going to be £1,395,160 over 20 years at today's figures, though this will likely increase with inflation. Based on their power ratings, the two boilers at Lord Coke's Holcombe Hall estate are likely to bring in more than £63,000 a year, also a figure that will rise with inflation, generating the equivalent of £1.264 million over 20 years of RHI payments. There is no suggestion that any of the individuals who have benefited from the grant have broken any law or rule. And a government spokesperson said, "These claims are a gross exaggeration. The renewable heat incentive in Great Britain has strict cost controls, budget caps, and other mechanisms to prevent overspend and tackle potential gaming." Ryanair must end its use of a racist and historically ignorant questionnaire for South African people flying to the UK, according to Scottish Green MSP Maggie Chapman, who has written to the company's CEO, Michael O'Leary. The questionnaire, which is organised by Ryanair, includes general knowledge questions about South Africa. It is written in the Afrikaans language, which was imposed during white minority rule. Scottish Green MSP Maggie Green said, "The use of this questionnaire is racist and historically ignorant. It needs to stop immediately. I am shocked that Ryanair thinks it is acceptable to use it. Afrikaans is a language that was imposed during the apartheid era of white minority rule. The choice to use it is deeply offensive and undermines anti-racist and anti-discrimination work." She continued, "I have written to Ryanair's CEO, Michael O'Leary, urging him to do the right thing by immediately ending this ignorant and racist policy. No company should be using these disgraceful questionnaires or any others that can be stressful and traumatic for people who have faced persecution because of the colour of their skin or the languages they do and do not speak." The UK may now be entering its third wave of coronavirus this year, researchers have warned, as official figures show infections are on the rise again in England and Northern Ireland. The Office for National Statistics said its latest analysis of swabs from households across Britain revealed a mixed picture with a small increase in positive tests in England and Northern Ireland, while the trend in Wales and Scotland remained unclear. The ONS data, which gives the most reliable picture of the state of the UK outbreak, suggests that the steady fall in infections over recent months may have gone into reverse, as cases are driven up by the more transmissible BA4 and BA5 Omicron variants. According to the ONS survey, an estimated 797,500 people in England and 27,700 in Northern Ireland would have tested positive for COVID in the week ending the 2nd of June. That's up from 784,100 and 24,300 respectively in the week before. The the emergence in November last year of the first Omicron variant, BA1, sparked waves of COVID around the world. This spring, a second UK wave was fueled by a more contagious relative known as BA2. While BA2 is now in decline, it has two more transmissible descendants, namely BA4 and BA5, both of which are on the rise. Public health officials are particularly concerned about BA5, which is spreading faster than BA4 and may be responsible for a fresh spike in cases in Europe, particularly in Portugal and Germany. At the end of May, BA5 made up nearly 14% of COVID virus genomes analysed in England, nearly double that for BA4. The latest ONS report shows that the percentage of people testing positive for coronavirus increased in London, the South East and the North West, but fell in the East Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber. While infections have been falling in all age groups, rates have now either levelled out or started to rise, with clear increases evident in 35 to 49-year-olds. The University of Strathclyde is one of 3 higher education institutions in Scotland to receive funding from the Scottish Government-funded Royal Society of Edinburgh Scotland-Germany Hydrogen Research Scheme. The programme aims to facilitate research and practice-based partnerships between the two countries to explore the future use of hydrogen. To that end, the University of Strathclyde is working in cooperation with Technische Universität Braunschweig to develop a digital toolkit for hydrogen production. The University of Strathclyde is a strategic partner of TU Braunschweig. The contact came about through the joint commitment of CSER, a network of more than 50 leading universities of science and technology in Europe. Since 2019, there has been an intensive exchange, especially in the area of research. In concrete terms, both universities are now working together on the hydrogen project DITO H2, funded by the Scotland-Germany Hydrogen Research Scheme. The aim of this project is to develop a modelling framework that maps technological advances at different levels and quantifies how advances at the material level translate into performance improvements at the electrolyser and energy grid level. The framework will facilitate rapid decision-making on the value of integrating new technologies and materials as they become available. In addition to the intensive technical exchange and the exciting work on several scales of hydrogen production, we also see the project that is now starting as a great opportunity to establish a long-term international research partnership with all project participants. An integral part of the project is a workshop in which important players in German and Scottish hydrogen research will network beyond the project consortium and develop future research strategies and subsequently design further joint project proposals around green hydrogen, said Professor Daniel Schroeder, head of the Institute of Energy and Systems Process Engineering at TU Braunschweig. Green hydrogen is high on our research agenda. Networking in Europe is only logical in order to work together with our partners to share knowledge and to arrive more quickly at solutions for one of the most pressing goals, and that's the move away from fossil fuels. That is why I am particularly pleased to be launching a strategic partnership with the University of Strathclyde in Scotland in the near future, and to be intensifying our joint activities, said Professor Angela Ittel, the president of the German university. The project is to be led for Strathclyde by Dr. Dragos Nigu, a Chancellor's Fellow in the Department of Chemical and Process Engineering, alongside colleagues at the university's Advanced Forming Research Centre, the Institute for Energy and Environment, and the Power Networks Demonstration Centre. Dr. Nigu said, "I am delighted to have the opportunity to carry out research, which will address key national and international priorities in the diffusion of hydrogen and to support early commercialisation and application in communities and industry. I am excited to work with an internationally high-level team that combines knowledge from materials, manufacturing, electrical engineering, and electrochemistry. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Scottish Power and the Lower Saxony Ministry of Economic Affairs, Employment, Transport and Digitalisation for their support of our project." And that was our final item this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station and to make new programming for you. If you are able to support us, then please subscribe or donate to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. You will also find our appeals for assistance on Facebook and Twitter, because the urgent need for financial support is now more pressing than ever before. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can also find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot and on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. Meantime, Hugh will be here again on Sunday with the next edition of the Full Scottish, so please tune in and join him at 12 noon on Sunday. And that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 7:35. Thank you to everyone who has been watching this evening. I hope that you have a very peaceful weekend and can join us again soon here on Broadcasting Scotland. Bye-bye.